Being unprepared is how great fathers become weekend visitors. I'm Jude Sandval, and this is Strategic Defense, the operational briefing for fathers who refuse to be sidelined by a system that exploits drift and unpreparedness. I ensure your mistakes don't become your permanent reality. While a lawyer handles your legal rights, I serve as your guide through the decision gap to protect your actual role as a father. You are now entering the command center. Today's briefing begins now. Hello, dads, and welcome back to this week's episode and briefing. Today, we are going to be talking about something your attorney will never, ever ask you about, and that is about your chest. Let me explain. If you're navigating a divorce right now, you know exactly what I mean. You know that specific heavy sensation that sits right behind your sternum. You know the way your breathing shallows the second your phone vibrates. You know the shot of adrenaline that hits your stomach when you see your name light up the screen. Most dads think their biggest problem is their legal strategy, their custody schedule, or their asset division. But I'm here today to tell you that none of these things matter. None of those things matter if you don't have control over your own body. Today, we're going to talk about your calm, not as some soft therapeutic concept, not as a self-help platitude about taking the high road while your life is on fire. We're going to treat your calm as a cold, hard, tactical asset. And I want to start by telling you a little story about a father. I'm just going to call him Anthony. Anthony was one of the most disciplined guys that I've ever coached. When it came to managing his communication with his ex, he was flawless on paper. He followed every rule. He kept his messages short, Biff, Gray Rock. He refused to argue. He didn't defend himself. 43 days into his case, his communication record looked textbook. His ex had sent him 210 messages. He had sent exactly 210 replies. And the average response length of those replies was 9 words. Perfect. He didn't write a single defensive sentence. He didn't show a single ounce of emotion on paper, in black and white. His custody case was absolutely winning itself. But, and there's a but, inside Anthony, a completely different story was unfolding. He had not slept in more than 5 hours a night over 2 weeks. His resting heart rate had climbed 12 beats per minute. He had lost 8 pounds, and it was the wrong kind of 8 pounds, the kind you lose when your body's eating its own muscle under the stress of a constant survival mode. Every single time his phone buzzed, his chest tightened so hard he had to breathe through his teeth. He was running his discipline on pure willpower, and the battery was running out. So, on day 43, his ex sent a message specifically designed to detonate his nervous system. She didn't just attack him, she reached into his history. She invoked his late mother. She brought up his daughter, and she accused him of being unsafe. And Anthony, for a split second, broke. Now, he didn't scream. He didn't threaten her. He just sent a simple 4-line reply. And by any normal standard, it wasn't even a bad message. He just defended one single fact, and he tried to explain one simple thing. However, her attorney had that message printed out and presented to the judge 6 days later at their hearing. Think about the math of that moment. He had 42 days of a pristine, perfect record, but none of those 42 days were in that motion, obviously, right? Only that one single paragraph of defense was on the judge's desk. And the judge looked at that printout, sighed, and noted that while the father appeared generally calm, he displayed moments of emotional reactivity when pressed. And the judge used that one paragraph to keep the temporary parenting restrictions in place, citing the need for stability. Now, Anthony's discipline collapsed because his discipline was running on that willpower. And willpower is a battery. It depletes. If you try to run your communication armor on willpower alone, it will last about 2 weeks. To run it for the 18 months your case is going to take, you need a nervous system practice underneath your communication rules. It is the difference between appearing calm and actually being calm. It's the difference between acting like a rock and actually becoming that rock. It's the difference between an external script that holds for a few weeks and an internal state that holds for years, which is what you want. So today we're going to look at the biology of why external discipline always cracks, how your kids are reading your nervous system beneath your words in the exact step-by-step physiological protocol you must run to rewire your default state under fire. So let's look at that, at the first reason why external discipline without internal regulation always fails. Your willpower, like I said, is a depleting resource. Every single time you read a hostile, manipulative text and you suppress your urge to react, you are spending a small, measurable amount of your brain's executive function fuel. You're draining the battery. By the Friday evening of a long week of work, financial stress, and constant suppression, your tank is completely and entirely empty. A hostile text sent at 9 o'clock on a Friday night hits a brain with zero fuel left. It hits an empty tank. And that is exactly when she has learned to send the hardest, most damaging messages. If you haven't built a physical practice to replenish that battery, you will break. I did. I know lots of great dads that have. And it is just a mathematical certainty. The second reason is that your body keeps the score. Suppressing your outward reaction without addressing the underlying physiological spike does not make the stress disappear. It just moves it inside your organs. Your sleep collapses, your resting heart rate climbs, your digestion gets strained, your concentration fragments. Eventually, the physical vessel, your body holding the discipline together, simply stops being able to hold the weight. Your body will force the breakdown if your mind won't. And the third reason, the one most fathers completely underestimate, as I did, is that your kids feel exactly what you feel, regardless of what you say. Inside your children's brains is a neurological structure called mirror neurons. Their sole function is to read, mirror, and internalize the emotional state of people around them, particularly the parent in front of them. If you are internally agitated, terrified, and angry, but you're standing at the kitchen counter pretending to be calm, your kids do not receive the calm. They receive the agitation. The mask that you've got on might work on the written court record, but it does not work on your 7-year-old sitting at the breakfast table. Your kids are not auditing your reply tone in the parenting app. They're auditing the energy you carry into the room. And that energy is downstream of your nervous system, not your communication protocol. Not that the communication protocol isn't important, like we've talked about in past episodes, but you cannot say the right thing to cover up a fear-based emotion. Your kids are reading you under your words, not in those words. So what do you do to fix this? We have to look at the biology of what is actually happening in your brain when she presses send. And I want you to stop blaming yourself for being emotional and start running your body like the high stakes engineering problem it actually is. I get a lot of guys that get down on themselves. Like, I'm upset or blah, blah, blah. It's okay. Your nervous system was not designed to help you thrive in a custody dispute. It was designed thousands of years ago for one thing and one thing only: threat detection and threat avoidance. It is an evolutionary survival engine, that has not received an upgrade for the 21st century. It does not know the difference between a predator in the woods and a hostile text from your ex on a screen. To your amygdala, they are the exact same input. You threaten your environment, and the chemical response is identical. The moment her message hits your screen, the hijack sequence begins in slow motion. Within 200 milliseconds, long before any conscious thought has even entered your mind, your unconscious self identifies the threat. Instantly, your attention locks on the past. Your mind starts scanning every single related wound, every betrayal, and every unresolved grievance in your history. Then your attention projects into the future, extrapolating the worst case scenario. You project the money you'll lose, the custody you'll lose, your kids being turned against you, and your ultimate failure. None of this has actually happened, but your brain is convinced all of it is happening right now. Your sympathetic nervous system fires immediately. Cortisol floods your bloodstream, adrenaline spikes, your heart rate climbs, your breathing shortens, and your muscles tense. And then the trap closes. And this is the big thing. Your prefrontal cortex shuts down. And the prefrontal cortex is the area of your brain responsible for critical thinking, logical judgment, creative problem solving, and emotional regulation. And that is temporarily taken offline by your own survival biology. The actual very part of your brain you need in this moment to write a calm, strategic, court defensible response is the exact part of your brain that has been disabled by the text itself. So what I want you to imagine now is this chemical flood happening to you 3 to 10 times a day, right? Every single day for 12 to 18 months during your divorce, all while you're trying to hold down a job, raise your kids, pay your bills, and manage this legal case. Dads, you are not weak. You're simply running an evolutionary survival system in a context it was never designed for, and the system is doing its job, actually. So what I want to do is I want to put a different system in charge for you, and that's what we're going to talk about for the duration of this episode. And the key to this entire shift is a deeply counterintuitive insight. So listen to this. You must center first and tend later. I'll say that again. You must center first and tend later. When that text lands, your biological instinct is to do something immediately. You want to react, fight, flight, freeze, right? You want to write the perfect response, call your lawyer, or fix the problem. But if you try to tend the situation while you are in that chemically hijacked state, you will use past survival-based intelligence to solve a highly complex, modern legal problem. And past intelligence, the conditioning of every painful event in your history that just got reactivated by her text, is designed to recreate past outcomes, which is exactly what you don't want. If you respond while hijacked, you will inevitably recreate your past negative outcomes. So, you must establish a non-negotiable rule. When the spike hits, you do absolutely nothing about the situation for the next 2 to 5 minutes at least. Not nothing forever, just nothing right now. You don't touch the keyboard. You don't outline the strategy. You don't look at the screen. You center first and you tend second. Center first, tend second. If you center first, you bring the right version of you to the situation. If you tend first, you bring the wrong version. It's a simple math equation if you want to look at it that way. To execute this, we're going to use, and I'm going to teach you a specific 4-step physiological reset protocol. The next time your phone buzzes and you feel that heat in your chest or that tightening, you run these 4 steps in order before you do anything else for that 2 to 5 minutes, okay? Step 1, You acknowledge the emotional state. You name what you're feeling out loud if you are alone, or in your head if you're not. And you do it with absolute specificity. You say, right now, I am feeling intense anger. I am feeling fear about losing my kids. I am feeling deep resentment about how this is going. And most dads, and this was my case too until I learned this, most dads skip this step because they think naming an emotion doesn't do anything. But it's actually quite the opposite. Cognitive neuroscience proves there is a powerful phenomenon called name it to tame it. The moment you put a precise verbal label on an emotion, you reactivate your prefrontal cortex, right? That's what we want and that's what we need. The act of naming the feeling actually reduces the amygdala's chemical grip on your brain. It's the first crack in the hijack. You don't have to fix the emotion or try to feel differently. You just have to name it. Now then, you acknowledge the physiological hijack, all right? So you've named the emotion, called it out, and now you're going to acknowledge the physiological hijack. You look at your body and you say, my nervous system's currently hijacked. I'm in a fight or flight survival response. My prefrontal cortex is offline, and the version of me who can solve this problem is not available right now. This step creates immediate psychological distance between you and the chemical storm. So you're separating yourself. The hijack is something happening to your body. It's not who you are. It also gives you permission to stop trying to think your way out of the crisis while the thinking machinery in your brain is temporarily turned off. It reframes your confusion, because that's what happens, right? It reframes your confusion not as a personal failure, but as a biological state. And that's where I get guys, and this is where I was at too, like, why can't I control my emotions? Why can't I figure this out? I'm like always in this state of emotional reaction, right? This helps reframe your confusion. It's not a personal failure. It is a biological state. And then step 3, you center your nervous system through breathing. It is so simple. This is where you do the actual physical work. And the fastest, most reliable way to tell your body that the threat is over is slow nasal breathing, box breathing, four-sided breathing, yogic breathing, whatever you call it. It works because that slow nasal inhalation and exhalation.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hey, dads, Jude here. I'm pausing this conversation for a mission critical warning. Everything we discuss on this podcast only works if you have a role to return to. Most fathers don't lose their kids in court. They lose ground quietly through drift and decisions made under pressure. Being unprepared is how great fathers become weekend visitors. I ensure your mistakes don't become your permanent reality. Stop the drift today at thedivorcedadvocate.com. Take the free weekend visitor risk assessment or book your fatherhood protection session. Your kids are counting on you. Now, back to the show.
Directly activates your vagus nerve, which immediately dials down your sympathetic nervous system and turns on your parasympathetic system. It forces your heart rate down and relaxes your muscles even before your mind has agreed that you are safe. These mechanics are precise. You inhale slowly through your nose for a count of 3 or 4. You hold that breath at the top for a count of 3 or 4. And then you exhale slowly through your nose for a count of 3 or 4. And you hold the breath empty at the bottom for a count of 3 or 4. You repeat this cycle 4, 8 times, wherever you feel comfortable, until you feel physically that your shoulders are relaxing and that your chest is softening. But it must be through your nose, not your mouth, because the nasal breathing is what triggers the vagal tone. Mouth breathing bypasses the biological switch completely. So the first time you run this under pressure and watch your hands shaking, I'm telling you, you're going to be amazed. You will realize that this is not a meditation trick. It is simply and truly raw biology. Okay, the final step. You anchor in your future, in the future you're actually building. So now you've got this, you've controlled all the biological reactions now. Once your body is closer to center and your prefrontal cortex is back online, you can redirect your attention. You stop looking at the text on the screen and you look at your long-term mission. You picture the end state you are fighting for. You picture your children stable, sleeping peacefully under your roof, and your home established in a calm routine. You picture a random Tuesday 3 years from now when the entire legal case is closed and your kids are safe. And you hold that specific picture in your mind for 30 seconds. And then, looking back at this present moment from inside that future victory, you ask yourself this one single question. What is the response that the version of me who has already built that stable life would send to this text right now? And I'll say that again. You're going to ask yourself one single question. What is the response that the version of me who has already built that stable life would send this text right now? Whatever answer comes is the only thing you write. Almost always, it's going to be a one-word, neutral, gray rock response or a Biff response. Often, it's just going to be no response at all. It's never going to be that 4-paragraph emotional defense your hijacked self wanted to send the 5 minutes earlier. So you run those 4 steps, and only then do you handle the situation. So this reset protocol is how you neutralize the daily triggers, the ones that are coming in all day long. But to win the long game, you have to understand a deeper concept, and that is the emotion you feel is actually older than the text she sent. When her message lands and you feel a wave of intense anger, your brain tells you the text caused the anger. And this is where it gets interesting, guys. But that is not biologically accurate. The message did not create the anger. The message simply activated a pattern of anger that was already sitting inside your nervous system waiting for a trigger to happen. And you've heard now Joey Klein talk about this several times on very old podcasts when he did some work with one of my coaching clients, and most recently when we talked with him about his new book, Relationship Alchemy. So these are your preconditioned emotional patterns, the personal software trained into your nervous system by your childhood, your past relationships, and the marriage that is just ending, right? They sit dormant until a triggering event or circumstance reaches in and pulls the thread on that or activates something, right? When that happens, the emotion you are feeling is actually a past memory being run through a present moment circumstance, or if you want to call it trigger. Trigger is a hard word anymore because it's been overutilized for different reasons. So that's why I like activated. If you respond from that activated state, you're using past intelligence and you will inevitably recreate your past outcomes. Again, what we don't want. Your decades of relational research prove that left untrained, we as humans will just reperform the exact same conditioned emotional responses for the rest of their lives with different people in different settings producing the same painful results. But if you train the pattern, you can rewire the software. Your nervous system's default response is not your destiny. With sustained training over months, you can actually retrain what gets activated when life pulls your trigger. The same hostile text can arrive, and instead of triggering panic and defense, it can trigger grounded clarity and clinical focus. This is not about becoming numb, or it's not about meditating yourself into not caring. It's about engineering your baseline state so that when you are provoked, the shape of your response is entirely different. So how do we do this? What we use is a sustained 4-step inner training practice. First, you train your emotional awareness. You must get highly skilled at noticing exactly what you are feeling in real time with clinical specificity. Most dads that I talk to, and I'm like, guys, like, I am exactly the same way with this. And I experienced all of this until I learned more about it and somebody actually taught me how to figure this out. Most dads can only name 2 emotional states: fine or I'm pissed off. Operating on those 2 words is like trying to navigate an unfamiliar city with a map that only has 2 streets on it. You need a richer vocabulary. You need to identify whether you are feeling anxious, resentful, ashamed, disappointed, grieving, helpless, lonely, whatever it might be. Each of those is a different signal with a different physiological remedy. Your first month of this work is simply expanding your vocabulary so you can name the terrain. So second, you align your relationship to those emotions. Most dads either suppress their feelings until they explode, which is very, very common, especially with those of us who are codependent, or they just completely get hijacked by them because they've never learned how to do this emotional regulation. But then there's also a third, far more powerful option. You acknowledge the emotion, which we're talking about here. You acknowledge the emotion, you accept that it is present in your body, and you treat it as information rather as an instruction. Your emotions are telling you where you currently are. They're not telling you what you must do. The moment you separate those two, the emotions stop driving the bus of your legal strategy. And I think you can extrapolate why that's important and how that can benefit you, right? So third, you then center that fear-based emotion. And you do this by running the 4-step reset protocol consistently. And you've got to do it. You've got to be cognizant. You got to do it day after day, week after week, every single time you get triggered. Each time you choose to center a hijack instead of acting from it, you will weaken the neural pathway of that old pattern. Okay. So this has been programmed into you is the best way to describe it. And after enough repetitions, the trigger literally stops producing that same intensity, that the same provocation that used to ruin your entire week. 6 months from now will register nothing more than a passing inconvenient thought. I promise you. And after years, it's not even going to register because you've created a whole new neural pathway, right? And then fourth, you rewire, and this is how you make that new pathway, right? You rewire towards a constructive baseline. This is the long-term work of training your nervous system to spend its ordinary baseline hours in states of calm, acceptance, and presence rather than anxiety and fear. And this is not, and look, guys, this is not some spiritual woo-woo feel-good concept. This is raw neurological engineering. The daily reset keeps you out of trouble in the short term, while this slower daily baseline training rewires your nervous system for the long haul. Okay, we're in the home stretch, but this last part now is the hardest and the most vital realization of this entire practice. I'm going to ask you to sit with this cleanly before your mind tries to reject it. Okay. So I want you to focus in and listen to what I'm about to say, because it's going to be a hard one to listen to, and it's going to hit. The emotions you feel about your soon to be ex or your ex are 100% yours, and they have absolutely nothing to do with her. I'm going to say that again. I know this is going to be hard, and you might be turning me off right now, but try not to turn me off and listen through this. The emotions you feel about your ex are 100% yours, and they have absolutely nothing to do with her. Okay. And so I know how that sounds. Your ex is doing things specifically designed to provoke you. Her behavior is horrible. It's harmful. She's actively trying to damage your relationship with your kids. And I'm not telling you to excuse a single thing she does. And I'm not telling you to let her off the hook. But I want you to look at your life right now. Your ex is not in the room with you at the moment. You haven't spoken to her maybe in hours, maybe even days. And yet, if you think of her for a split second, what happens to your body? What happens in your chest? You might feel a pulse of anger or resentment or fear about your upcoming court date. She did not do anything to you in the last 60 seconds. She isn't even present. And yet, the emotional storm is active inside your body in this very moment. That storm is coming from you. The conditioning is yours. The chemical flood is yours, and the pattern is yours. This realization is not a surrender. It is your ultimate reclamation of power. As long as you locate the cause of your emotional state and her behavior, you are entirely dependent on her behavior changing for you to find peace. And she has zero incentive to change, guys. I hope you already know that. In fact, she is a high conflict. If she's a high conflict personality, she has every incentive to keep you dysregulated. If your peace of mind depends on her being reasonable, you will never have peace. The moment you take absolute 100% ownership of your emotional state, recognizing that the nervous system response is yours to manage, you regain the power to change it. You can only ever truly change the things that you actually own. And the ultimate test of this work is when you can think of your ex and feel nothing but clinical acceptance, maybe even compassion, because the trigger simply no longer fires. It does not hit. The bullet in your gun has been decommissioned. So this inner work, dads, is not a side project. Really, it is the core of your parenting. This is one of the first things I talk about in coaching and one of the things that we get grounded in. Your kids have those mirror neurons that are constantly reading your baseline state. When you are internally agitated, even if you are speaking in a soft, controlled voice, they receive the signal that they are not safe. If you make breakfast for your kids while internally rehearsing your legal testimony, your kids do not experience breakfast. They experience agitation that smells like pancakes. If you carry resentment into the car on the way to soccer practice, your daughter's not riding in a car with music playing. She is riding in a slow rolling room of resentment that her nervous system has to absorb until you drop her off. Your kids cannot name this, and they will not bring it up to you. But repeated exposure to a fear-based parental state slowly shapes their nervous system too, making them more anxious, more guarded, and less likely to confide in you when life gets hard. You cannot cover up a survival-based emotion with the right words. Your kids are reading your state. They are not reading your sentences. But when you carry a genuine, rewired calm into the room, their nervous system reads safe. They relax, they lean in, they confide in you, they become themselves around you. The same dad with exact same kids in the exact same kitchen can produce two completely different children, not by saying two different things, but by being in a different state. Tending your own nervous system is the actual parenting. Let me say that again, because that's pretty profound. Tending your own nervous system is the actual parenting. That has the greatest impact, dads. So don't fall into the martyrdom trap. And this is something I hear from dads all the time. And look, this was my biggest thing too. I just have to sacrifice my own life for the kids. They are all that matters. I don't, it sounds noble, but it is a toxic framework that will destroy your family, trying to be that super dad. When you live entirely for your kids, you run your physical, emotional, and financial tanks down to zero. Within 6 months, you're completely depleted, and your kids end up getting your exhausted leftovers. You show up to breakfast and bedtime in survival mode. You end up modeling martyrdom for them, teaching them that being a good adult means abandoning your own vitality. And eventually, the depleted version of you will break. It almost broke me. It always does break. And when you collapse, your kids who have been living downstream of you for months absorb the shock of seeing your supposedly stable parent fall apart. Putting your own oxygen mask on first is not selfish. It is a tactical necessity. Your kids do not need a martyr. They need a present, regulated, vital father with something left in his tank to actually give them. The time you spend working out, sleeping, seeing friends, and rebuilding your own life is not time stolen from your kids. It is the single most important investment you can make for them. To make this operating system real, you must install it into a daily, non-negotiable rhythm. First, you start every morning with 10 minutes of centering. This happens before you check your phone, before you look at email, and before the kids wake up. You sit down, you run 10 minutes of box breathing, you read your mission statement, and you picture your long-term end state for 30 seconds. This is the high leverage 10 minutes of your day. If you aren't a morning person, you become one. You do not start your day by letting the notification sound dictate your state. Second, you run 5-second check-ins 3 to 5 times a day. Set reminders on your phone. When they fire, you pause for 5 seconds and ask, in this moment, what am I feeling? Where's my nervous system? You name the emotion, you notice your body, and if you're hijacked, you run 1 minute of your breathing to correct the drift before it costs you a decision. Third, you execute the 4-step reset emergency protocol anytime her notification lands or a conflict spikes. You acknowledge the emotion, you name the hijack, you run the breath, and you anchor in the future before you ever touch the keyboard. And fourth and finally, you end every day with 10 minutes of decompression. Phone in another room, slow breathing, a factual log of your day, and a mental rehearsal of tomorrow's priorities. This is what protects your sleep, which is what protects your prefrontal cortex, which is what allows every other pillar to stand. And fifth and finally, install a brief 1-minute feelings check-in. This is one that's a great one because then it helps model for your kids. A feelings check-in with your kids at the dinner table. Each person names one emotion they felt today and one thing that produced it. You start modeling the behavior with simple language. You will teach your kids an emotional vocabulary they won't learn anywhere else and that we didn't learn, right? And you will train them to see that naming emotions calmly is what strong, stable adults do. Every single fear-based emotion you feel is actually a clue pointing to an unmet expectation. When you feel the anger or sadness or anxiety, find the expectation behind it, run the 3 tests. Is she capable and willing to meet this expectation? Does the family court system actually enable this expectation? Am I capable of meeting it myself? If the expectation fails any of these tests, it is unreasonable. And holding on to it guarantees only one thing, and that's suffering, dads. You must evolve the expectation. I want the court to be fair becomes I want to run my case effectively inside a system that is fundamentally indifferent to fairness. Same value, different expectation, and the suffering that you're experiencing evaporates. Your personal power lives exactly 2 places. 1, the actions you take. 2, the way you respond to what happens. That's the entire list. You cannot control her, you cannot control the judge, and you cannot control the past. So stop spending 80% of your cognitive bandwidth on the things you don't control. Take absolute 100% ownership of your response, let go of the rest, and hold the line. Think about it this way. If you woke up tomorrow and suddenly experienced a 40% decline in your physical ability, a loss of strength or mobility that was going to permanently alter how you lived your life and how you showed up for your children for the next 20 years, you wouldn't just sit on your hands and hope it sorted itself out, right? You wouldn't try to tough it out alone or read a self-help book on how to fix it. You'd immediately consult a specialist, a doctor, physical therapist, somebody to rehabilitate your body and protect your physical future. Yet, right now, you're under the crushing stress of this high conflict divorce. Your brain's experiencing that exact same 40% decline in its cognitive and decision-making abilities. You're functioning impaired by the cortisol and adrenaline flooding your system at the precise moment you're being forced to make high-stakes legal and financial decisions that are going to dictate the rest of your life. Dads, I couldn't do it. You cannot navigate this cognitive fog on your own, and you cannot afford to make permanent compromises when your brain is running on a limited processing power. You need a guide, a specialized guide, someone who knows this exact legal and psychological battlefield to walk you through this high stakes window and protect your future. And that's why I want you to go to the website, talkwithjude.com. Let's schedule a time for us to talk about this, triage what your next steps are, clear the fog, analyze your timeline, and build a strategy that ensures your temporary cognitive deficit that's going on right now does not become your permanent legal reality. Your children don't need you to be a nice guy who got processed out of their lives because he was too afraid of conflict to lead. They need a father who is clear, disciplined, and prepared. Dads, reclaim your role, build your defense, and most importantly, stay strong. I hope that you found some great value in this today. It is critical. If you did, please share it far and wide. Leave us a comment or at least a star rating. It helps us immensely. Have a great week, and I will talk to you next week. God bless.
This concludes today's briefing. Remember, in the family court system, intelligence without execution is liability. Ground is lost quietly during the decision gap between your court hearings. Being unprepared is how great fathers become weekend visitors. I ensure your mistakes don't become your permanent reality. Secure your role today at thedivorcedadvocate.com. Take the weekend visitor risk assessment to identify your exposure or book your private fatherhood protection system. Stay strong. Your kids are counting on you.